Hello, Natasha.
Hey.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. I can't seem to see you.
2 seconds. There we go.
Perfect. Hello, how are you?
Good.
Nice to see you. And Khadea's here somewhere, just getting sorted. Hello. Welcome, everybody. How are you both?
Good.
Good, thanks. Brilliant. I think we should just wait maybe a few minutes. Just wait for people to come in. You had a good day?
Yeah. It's been raining a lot, hasn't it?
So
yeah,
rainy.
Absolutely. It's a day for indoors. It's a day for a preview indoors. I'm quite glad that we don't have to leave the house for this. In a way. Cool. So I might just get started, if that's all right with everybody. Hopefully everybody's joining us and can continue to join. And I'll just say good evening to everybody and welcome to the preview of Umbilic, which is a new video work, moving image by Natasha Ruwona. My name's Brooke Milliken and I'm part of the HUBCAP committee. And HUBCAP is a student-run contemporary art gallery based in the heart of Edinburgh College's Granton campus. Founded in 2019, our aim is to offer a varied programme of exhibitions, events and publications, providing an inclusive platform for dialogue, learning and community engagement. I'm very pleased to introduce both Natasha Ruwona, who will be showing her work before a Q&A session, and Khadea Kuchenmeister, who's prepared an introductory text to Natasha's most recent work, commissioned in part by HUBCAP. Natasha Ruwona is a Scottish Zimbabwean artist, researcher and curator. Natasha's artistic practice is research-based and investigates racialized spatialization in line with Black feminist geographies via the process of writing, digital art and performance. Natasha engaged with the contemporary art practice course at Edinburgh College before going on to graduate at Edinburgh College of Art in 2020. And Khadea Kuchenmeister is an artist and producer based in Edinburgh. She graduated from Edinburgh College's contemporary art practice course in 2019. Since February 2020, Khadea has been member of the committee at Rhubaba Gallery and Studios alongside Natasha. And after Khadea's introduction to the work, we'll be watching and listening to Umbilic before a Q&A session with both artists. We've scheduled roughly an hour for the event, so we'll see how we get on. And if we do experience any technical issues, then just bear with us. Hopefully we'll get back up and running as soon as possible. I thoroughly encourage comments and questions from audience in the question box, and we'll try and get through those at the end of the questions. We'll see how we get on as well. And please do refer to the additional resources that we have linked in the comments as well that Natasha's provided for us. And without further ado, I'll pass over to Khadea with her introduction titled Towards an Unending Voyage.
Great, thank you so much, Brooke. And I'll just start reading this text. Thank you all that can be here and all that have transcended, embodied, dialogues ongoing, being in conversation with artist Natasha Ruwona through the terrains, the borders, migration and land displacement, slowly braiding together Black histories. Tonight I will read the first page of Feeding the Ghosts by Fred Diangua, as a way to hold stories untold and hold on to ones retold. The sea is slavery. Seawater boils in its own current. Salt gives the sea the texture of fabric, something thick and close-knitted, not unlike the fine dust of the barns seen floating in the shaft of light. Sea receives a body as if that body has come to rest on a cushion, one that gives way to the body's weight and folds around it like an envelope. Over 3 days, 131 such bodies, no, 132, are flung at the sea. Each lands with a sound that the sea absorbs and silences. Each opens a wound in the sea that heals over each body without an evidence of a scar. 264 arms, 264 legs, punch and kick against the tide that insists that all that land on it All who break its smooth surface must succumb to its swells, tumbles, pushes, and pulls. Water replaces air in 131 of these bodies. They fight and then become still, as if changing from struggle to embrace, seeing an enemy someone to love and therefore to hold, no longer against the water, but a part of its thrust from one point to the compass to another. Salt washes wounds on those bodies instilled by the locks, chains, masks, collars, binds, fetters, handcuffs, and whips of the land. Washes until those wounds belong to the sea.
Thank you, Khadea. That was lovely. And we're just going to go straight into Natasha's film. Everybody, please enjoy Umbilic. Oh, sorry, everyone. Khadea, I think you'll need to let Stuart be the host again, if that's all right. Sorry, guys, some expected technical issues. Hopefully it won't be too long.
Umbilic offers an expansion of the current discourse on hydrofeminism through an open research into water, in line with the Black feminist geographical framework. Scholar Catherine Kittrick first put forth the latter as an exploration of the relationship between Black women and geography, visible through architecture, movement, and migration. Hydrofeminism, a concept derived from Astrida Nunez, speaks to the relationship that exists between humans and water, through our beginnings in amniotic fluid, journeys across or through the ocean, and to our futures impacted by the rising sea levels as a result of climate change. Through uncovering a more inclusive understanding of hydrofeminism in relation to Blackness, it broadens the potential of both concepts and lends itself to the study of Black feminist geography by creating a focused discourse on water within the field, furthering the work already achieved within Black Atlantic study. The Black Atlantic, a term first used by Paul Gilroy in 1993, has been developed into the study of African identities and cultures as they are formed across the Atlantic Ocean. The continent and the diaspora find their meeting point within the Atlantic Ocean to symbolise the old and new worlds that were created by the transatlantic slave trade. This work forms only one part of what I am calling Scottish Black Atlanticism, an exploration into the impact of Scotland's contribution in the formulation of the Black Atlantic. Beginnings. Location, amniotic sac, human body. A border of protective liquid shapes the fetus within the womb, beginning a series of exchanges between bearer and baby. Release of said liquid. Our bodies become containers to hold the water within us, 60 to 90%. Replenish 6 to 8 glasses a day. Can humans breathe underwater? Earth may have been birthed into its own clay womb, with remnants that can be found at the bottom of the ocean. Can humans breathe underwater? 70% of the world's surface. Catherine McKittrick and Clyde Woods describe how the ocean prompts a geographic narrative that may not be readily visible on maps. This tension between map and the unknown reconfigures knowledge, suggesting that places, experiences, histories, and people that no one knows do exist. I believe that this tension described allows those of us who are left outside of conventional narratives to investigate unknown and underexplored sites as our own territory. Plato created the Atlantis, a fictional underwater world that claims to play host to a utopian society full of human advancement situated within the Atlantic Ocean. This concept was evolved further into a Black Atlantis, informed by the mythology and music of Detroit electro duo Drexel. Taking its name from its creators, the underwater world of Drexel inhabits the ancestors of the enslaved. The Middle Passage formed part of the triangular trade during slavery where Africans were forcibly taken onto boats to the Americas. Drexia's theory is that of the pregnant slaves who were thrown overboard or jumped during Middle Passage, then had their babies in the ocean who adapted to breathing underwater, creating an advanced underwater civilization. Drexia's fictional narrative is inspired by the real-life Song massacre that happened in 1781, where more than 130 slaves from the British ship the Zong were thrown overboard in a fraudulent insurance claim made for bodies turned cargo. Your child, like currency. Tears wept, tears swept away, lost, but yet, found in deep depths, became a part of the ocean so often feared. The hold. Location, floating, sinking, within the Atlantic Ocean and within the pages of my books, words, womb. The Middle Passage's birth canal takes the factory of the belly as its laborious space. Womb. Birthing, borning, producing, womb. Moon pushing and pulling, holding, on, held, sunken, lost, is the belly of the world. I too become the principal point of passage between the human and the non-human world. I too become a memory of the future. The ship is reimagined by Christina Sharp, and its hold becomes a metaphor for its belly, its very own womb that births blackness. The hold evolves into the prison, the institution, architectural repetition. Water is a metaphor for locating the fluidity of blackness and queerness in Omazeki Natasha Tinsley's text, as both identities intertwine themselves together. Tinsley takes the slave ship holders are setting to imagine black bodies as being queer in the sense of connecting in ways that commodified flesh was never supposed to, loving your own kind when your kind was supposed to cease to exist, forging interpersonal connections that counteract imperial desires for Africans. Desire, a touch, gentle, desire, rough, a touch, needily held, let go, rust, lost, needily held, let go, lust, lost. Bodies of erosion, landscapes, to the water we return. In her book, Ezelie's Mirrors, Imagining Queer Black Identities, Tinsley speaks of the many forms that the Caribbean water spill that Ezelie has taken across performance, art, and literature. How do we disappear, reappear, relocate ourselves? Where are our mirrors and who do we reflect back? Fluid, spirited beings remind us that in the water we can become anything at all. Our black queer tears, fears, masked. What could anyone do with this rising water but emulate the amphibians? Fishy existences complement and counteract human binaries, genderless, genderfluid, gills, fins, tails. In the water we can become anything at all. The Atlantic Ocean is an instrument for connecting lost bodies, lost histories, forced or chosen migration, the transportation of goods and bodies, bodies that were and are defined as being goods, water spirits who await evocation. An act of union, illusion, presence, memory, and dream. The leaf port in Edinburgh played a vital part in Scotland's mass tobacco trade, beginning in the early 17th century with the first recorded ship, the Job, returning to Leith from Virginia in March 1667. There are at least 2 voyages from Leith that are said to have taken place on vessels transporting the enslaved in the 18th century, which could possibly include the documented ship that left Leith for the Gambia, reaching Barbados in 1784. Sugar houses in Leith helped to refine transported sugar, with at least 4 existing within the city. Import, export. Scots built the tools, sold the goods, sail and set sail. In 1766, the River Clyde in Glasgow was carved out for the expansion of trade across the Atlantic Ocean so that larger ships could be built and sailed through and across all of the UK's main trading ports and docks. The architecture itself of the River Clyde participates in the act of hydrocolonialism, the role of human maritime activity in the colonisation of the ocean. Shallow dreams find depth in waters developed for trade. 1741 saw £8 million of tobacco being imported into the Clyde, with the deepening of the river only assisting in the processes of the transatlantic trade. The Clyde is a memory, a myth of industrial influence, the imagination of nationalism embedded and informed by war principles. Early presences of Black people in Scotland can be heavily felt in Leith, with reasons that can be attributed to arrivals, birth, baptism, education, work at sea, and departures. Historical accounts of these presences in Scotland speak of 2 African women who were captured from a Portuguese ship and arrived via Leith in 1506, presented as gifts to King James V. A notice for a runaway in the Edinburgh Evening Courant in 1773 details a black man, a sailor, may have been located in Leith searching for work and freedom. Water's movement is constantly in flux, yet rivers are said to provide a sense of locatingness. I wonder what this word means and if it is possible while being black in Scotland. 20th century Scotland saw many African sailors residing by Scottish waters, including Manuel Abreu, who alongside his brother Charlie were Scotland's first African boxers. Born and bred in Leith, Manuel gave up boxing due to racism and became a sailor. The Brumie Law race riots of 1919 were incited after rumours spread about African sailors who had travelled to the Clyde for work and had agreed to be paid lower wages, stealing the jobs of their white local counterparts. The riot broke out and black sailors found themselves being chased by the white sailors, as well as members of the public who then attacked them, even as they attempted to seek safety in the Brumie Law sailors' accommodation. The crowd grew in its hundreds and got extremely violent, with the police arriving and charging the African sailors, letting the white rioters remain free. Time-travelling particles pass through estuaries. How many times has the water from the Atlantic Ocean met the River Clyde, a Leith port? Architectural repetition. The British Empire is a memory, a myth of industrial influence, the imagination of nationalism embedded and informed by what once was. He sells seashells. Location, Dunbar, East Lothian, Scotland. Object found, cowrie shell. Encasing is smooth yet marked with ridges. The shell swallows its secrets behind its teeth. Its size demands for conscious handling. Cowrie shells, a form of currency once used amongst people within the global south. During the slave trade, Europeans took advantage of their high value as held by Africans and began trading cowries in exchange for slaves. A third to a quarter of the 6 million plus Africans taken to America were sold in exchange for shells. The shell is recast into a symbol for human life as it became a form of commerce. 1 pound of cowries in exchange for every 13 pounds of human flesh. This repurposing of the cowrie shell, as with its resemblance to a vagina, mirrors the transactional and anatomical value of black bodies as created by Europeans. And how might these shells have found themselves on the beaches of Scottish coasts? Are there ghosts of the sea longing to communicate truths, to drift the sunken evils of Scotland's very own black history to the surface? Bodies of water, floating, swimming, surviving, sinking. When was breathing forever an option that we could afford? We sit within a bereavement of being able to breathe with ease. The apocalypse has already happened. Welcome to the afterlife. As ice becomes a memory, must we begin carving waters to hold rising sea levels? Magnetic moon shaping instructing tide. Under the surface we reside. And so while we wait for our lungs to adapt, we bite tongues, choke on dry land. The sea is the repository for all the crimes of empire, the hold of history, once held, placed, forgotten, sunken, lost. When was breathing forever an option that we could afford? Scorpio, a water sign, vessel of the past, present and future, drawn to the impossibilities of the ocean, location, somewhere in the stars. I have fallen deeper into waters in my dreams of water, whatever that may mean, so I must too become a memory of the future.
Thank you, Natasha and Khadea.
Thanks so much. I wanted to say thank you to Khadea as well for coming and sharing that text and just giving her time in general. It was really beautiful.
Well,
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you to HUBCAP for giving the space and the platform to Natasha.
Oh, our pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure working with both of you guys. That was really amazing. It was really lovely to see the film come together. I know you've been working on it for a wee while. I think it was beautifully made, powerful and informative. And I think your words are really moving, and especially when you're discussing some quite stark information, you know, in such a beautiful way. I think it can be quite difficult to do. I think, yeah, it's really lovely, great to watch. Thank you. I'm sure everybody will agree. And thank you, Khadea. That was the first time I've heard your introduction, and that was lovely. I know you've been working, you've been alongside Natasha throughout a lot of the research process for this project. So it's really lovely to hear from the both of you tonight, and that was a really beautiful prelude to the film. So thank you very much. I've got some questions prepared, and I'd really love for any audience participation. Any comments or questions are more than welcome, and I'll try and get to those at the end. So yeah, I'm just going to get straight into some questions. So Natasha, you referred to your larger project existing around Umbilic. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about that and how it became, and if you currently see an endpoint for it?
I guess the project started in like late 2019, and I was thinking about Black Geographies, and I think that's when I read that book by Catherine McKittrick and Clyde Woods. And then from there I was thinking like, oh, there's so many avenues that I would like to research into this and make work about. So it started there with the film I made, In Dream's Eye. And then after that was kind of more land-based work. And then I moved on to thinking about Umbilic in January last year. And it did my first draft then, and then obviously like a year later now it's done. But yeah, no, definitely. I think there's a lot more strands. Like even just finishing this, I've been thinking a lot more about what else I want to do, and I'm quite glad to kind of release this and let this go and like explore those further, because there's a lot in Umbilic that is maybe an overview or it's not like a lot of information. And I think that, yeah, I'm really excited to like take that time now to kind of like deeply dive into like, I guess, different parts of the film, or maybe like some ideas that I touched on.
Yeah, there's so much to unpick in the film. I think it's brilliant, but yeah, you can see myself getting into a rabbit hole after this. There's so much more that I want to discuss with you about. So yeah, thank you. And I wonder if for anybody watching who's maybe new to the concepts that you're discussing, if you could maybe give a little bit of just a brief overview of your interpretation of Afrofuturism.
So Afrofuturism, I've been thinking a lot about maybe like in terms of like what I've read about it and what I actually feel towards it, and kind of how, yeah, as well that relates to this project, but the film in particular, and thinking about this kind of like middle point where we are in the present, and then taking that point all the way back and then all the way to the future forwards, but then that kind of like encompassing different lands as well, or different planes of like, or dimensions of like being in. So I think of Afrofuturism as like a way to access those different points by different things relating to like technology, spatial practice, and yeah, kind of playing around with what exists and what could exist, and then I guess mixing them together, I think, as well. But yeah, I definitely see it as like this access point into like a bigger idea of understanding different sorts of spaces and like what space could give you and what it doesn't give you as well.
Yeah. I wonder if you could describe the influence that Drexia's Black Atlantis mythologies had, and also what you feel the benefits might be of looking at the past through an Afrofuturist lens. And maybe that's a question for both of you.
Yeah, I think. Oh, Khadea, do you want to go?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like when you did your Afrofuturism performative lecture, you touched on sort of Detroit and like the music that was coming out of like exploring techno. It was really interesting because it was, yeah, looking at like music as a way of talking about the like the Black experience. And then yeah, from the reading group, it's really great that yeah you had such. I think you have so many reference points and books that you're looking at, which yeah really like I can see them in your work and the way that they inform it. That's yeah really interesting.
Yeah, I think like doing that first part of the project. I mean, yeah, I guess that was like part of the project as well in a wider way of like gathering the research I'd already done into Afrofuturism, and then like Drexel came into it then. But I guess for the film, I started with the cowrie shell research, and then like despite that being like towards the end of the film now, yeah, that was like the starting point for everything. And then I kind of worked my way backwards, which I sometimes do quite a lot, just accidentally. And I guess for me, like the benefit of like using Afrofuturism within that and looking at the past is this idea of like not having an importance on linear time, or like certain kind of like the way time kind of moves as well, and having a complete openness with that, I think is really, really nice. And then for Drexia, I guess like that idea kind of like made me really question a lot, of like this idea of an underwater world that inhabits Black people, and coming from such a sad place, but kind of being empowering in a way of thinking about these communities that could maybe exist under the water, and kind of flipping it on its head. And I guess that maybe as well, like thinking a lot about like the hopefulness within water, but also the kind of evils within it as well. And I guess it provides both things, and it's a sanctuary, but also a weapon. And yeah, I think that like Drexel kind of opened my eyes to that a little bit more, and thinking about spaces that might not necessarily be real, and yeah, how to think about those, or like situate like yourself in them as well.
Yeah, it's this idea of like radical imagination, which I'm going to get onto a bit later. Actually, I've got a question for both of you, but before that, I'd like to ask you a bit about hauntology. And in your practice, you describe your work as using hauntology to understand Black identities, and I'm wondering if you could briefly describe the term and also tell us how central this approach is to your filmmaking.
So hauntology is like really like an exciting thing for me that I've started thinking about, and like it's still quite new to me, but it definitely like fits in with this idea of like, who am I in the work as well. I think that's something that I've really like struggled with for a while, because I want to tell these stories, and like stories that are histories, and then also like add my kind of responses to them and how they fit in with myself, but also now and others. So yeah, thinking about that, like who am I, and like reading about hauntology and thinking of this idea of like the ghost, and maybe like I'm the ghost within the work, who tells these stories, who travels between hundreds of years ago to hundreds of years in the future. And yeah, for me, hauntology kind of provides a way of yeah, again, like accessing, or like a method of accessing that. So thinking about the past and how it repeats itself, and how the future, how we in the future need to impact that, or we in the present as well. So again, yeah, it's just a way of accessing these different kind of time frames that speak to each other.
Absolutely. I wonder if you got anything to say on that, Khadea?
Yeah, I really felt that throughout, and I think that from previous conversations, that like sort of accessing that ancestral knowledge, and but also the ancestral trauma of the sea. And I think that's why I felt like you're in conversation with and channeling the stories and like the sort of untold like speculative stories that could also be told, because this idea of like breathing underwater and like adapting to the conditions that you exist in is really interesting in just like the context of now as well, like adapting and yeah, it does root from this sort of idea of trauma, but then becomes a way of like speculating about alternatives, which yeah, from conversations has always been quite interesting. I think I think in one podcast we did talk about like detaching yourself from research that you're looking into, because I feel like reading about slavery and the transatlantic sort of like the impact Scotland had and the British Empire, there is yeah, there needs to be that detachment, but also accessing it from a different alternative way. If that, I don't know. I think I went somewhere with that. That wasn't a question, but just a response to what you're saying.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's like exactly it. Like, I think by kind of embodying these different people that exist in different times and also experiencing different things, but there's kind of this repetition, it allows that kind of distance. And also, I guess, yeah, like again, like making those kind of responses as well. I think that I didn't want it to just be like not all factual, but yeah, again, like plays it again with this idea of kind of like mythology within it, and maybe like who tells these stories, and who's kind of shut off from these stories, and again like accessing knowledge and things like that, and yeah, creating like a bridge, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, that leads perfectly onto my next question, which is how important is it for us to consider who gives us access to historical documents?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, yeah, like I've been thinking about this a lot in the last year, and looking at like the work that I've made, and like there's been a lot of reading and a lot of resources involved, because that's what I enjoy the most, but then realizing not everybody like learns that way, or like is able to access those things. So I think like using different platforms to open these sorts of access, like sharing texts, and that I got as access like with university, but not everyone has that because they cost like X amount of money. So yeah, being able to use what I've read and then share that as well, and people can access that in their own time, and yeah, take a bit more of control over what they have access to, but also what they want to access as well. And yeah, hopefully I answered that.
Yeah. Khadea, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think the paywall, the different institutions that hold this knowledge, even though like it feels like they've extracted it, and it feels very like it like it's taken the life out of those stories. It's just sort of it feels like it's been institutionalized. And through the film, you kind of like brought these stories into this like poetic existence. I don't know. It feels very like embodied the way that you've told these stories.
Absolutely. Going back to the film, Natasha, the Clyde and the Firth of Forth and also the Port of Leith feature in the film. I wonder how important these bodies of water were in bringing together the multiple aspects of your research.
I guess because there was so much research and there's so much that I didn't include or maybe only touched on really slightly. And I think I thought about the focus point of the work because it could get so large that a lot could get lost. So by like situating those I guess those like bodies of water and creating the linkage between them and the wider kind of like context of the Atlantic Ocean, but also like slave trade and just general trade and also reasons for Black people coming to Scotland. I thought that was a nice way to kind of bring it home, but also create a more focused like reading of those things, but also provide one on like a reading on like Scottish waters as well that can often get lost in the conversation of like the Black Atlantic. So yeah, it hopefully like brought kind of those connections closer. And yeah, made it again like another kind of way of accessing.
I wonder, on a more personal level, going back to what Khadea was saying about sort of distancing yourself, how might, if and how has your research sort of affected your personal relationship with your immediate environment and your home?
It's interesting because I guess there's a part of it when you're researching a place that you kind of pass by every so often, or you've passed by a lot. There's a there is a relationship there of how that feels, and then like digging in deeper, I guess, to the research and actually that kind of changing things, or maybe making you reflect on that a lot more. And I always think about like who's walked like before us and thinking about those kind of paths that we take, and who's kind of like tread on the same spots and who hasn't, and why isn't that, and why have they got there as well. So I think it's kind of made me reflect on how I'm moving around and create these kind of more imaginative stories of like what could be or like what could be possible. Um, but I think like because I knew quite a bit of the research already. It maybe already had sunk in to thinking about like the initial shock, or even just like thinking about something a lot and then working through it through like writing a response or creating the visuals or like that kind of like you kind of detach yourself from it anyway because it becomes this thing that you're working on for like hours or days or whatever, which is good and bad. But yeah, I think that it may be even like is a good thing sometimes to be able to like just sit with an idea or sit with a part of history and then work through it and think of ways that you can communicate it to other people, that maybe brings it into the now or brings it into the future.
Yeah, I think that's there are times you really have to consider the emotional like landscape of how things are shaped, and we're seeing like monuments that are still here, but thinking about people who aren't here anymore or who weren't who existed in really awful conditions, and reading about it you sometimes have to just just because I feel like for me personally my like where I was born and sort of West African flag that I had, not flag, sorry, West African map is one that's hard to look at because it's because of the history of how it was shaped by colonialism. But it's good to sit with that and continue to question sort of like positions and
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Like I think for me, being able to like question things, and then as you like move through these different spaces or move through like institutional spaces or people that I guess are institutionalized themselves, like having this knowledge that you've done or this research or like your way of interpreting it is kind of like quite powerful in response to that. And I think it creates your own relationship to something that isn't just a discourse or it isn't just a concept. It's like it's kind of like every kind of like I guess it kind of fits in with everything.
It's interesting because a lot of the information can be stark, but it just shows how important it is to reflect on the past and so that we can look to the future. And I want to ask you both a little bit about the concepts of dreaming, remembering and imagining as radical tools for change, and wonder if you both had something to say about how we can promote alternative ways of thinking going forward.
Do you want to go first, Natasha?
Oh, I was gonna ask you the same thing.
I have a few things floating around in my head. I've started to think about methodologies that are not that I feel like move away from like Eurocentrism and like Western ways of thinking. So there's a great text that I read, "Poetry is Not a Luxury," by Audre Lorde, and I'm just thinking like we should really like explore lived experience and like learn from the different knowledges that are already sort of like embodied and like are passed down through a collective memory or something. So like dreaming might be a way of accessing that. Something, because I always feel like I like to have conversations with people around me. So like my mum, in her practice, she says that through the dreams you can record them and then you can go back to interpret them and find some sort of prompt or some kind of, a bit like in a way, like, you know, like a just something that could maybe like guide you in a sense, and like just listening to our body and like dreaming is part of that, of like this vessel. So I think that we do need to think about radical tools, and that's kind of where I'm thinking like dreaming is a way of accessing or even being guided in a way.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I guess like going from that, like listening to your body is like a dream in a way, in a way as like having a marginalized body as well. There's something in like the act of like listening, but also dreaming like in itself, like to dare to dream, like is just such a big thing to like get up every day and be like present in the world, even only a small like part is really difficult. And I think that even just like daring to dream to just be in this body, but also like dream for better futures as well, I think is like really like a really special thing to have in you. And like I think I've like written down before like this idea of, I guess, like just like giving the world your dreams as well, like this is what I want, and this is what I want for us all, and thinking about that as a kind of offering in itself. But I definitely think like ideas of like radical dreaming is so necessary, and like how it seems that people like and who like are the founders of like Black Lives Matter in America, like they like radically dreamed like to get something, and to see that like progress in the last year has just been really special and important, but also sad. And thinking about the kind of like the radical dreamers that came before us as well, and how we're kind of following on from that in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I just had a thought about like dreaming for people who can't be with us, because I think about ancestral lineages, and like just sometimes when I'm like existing and thinking about all of what has happened in the last year, and the sort of pain and trauma of like marginalized communities, I try and dream for the people who can't be here with us. And that feels quite radical, in a world where, you know, we're not able to exist or even flourish. Dream for them feels radical.
No, definitely, yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys. I wonder if you had some advice for anybody trying to hone into their imagination and their dreamlike state, especially these times where it can be quite stressful and quite secluded. I think people have had quite a hard time tapping into that. I wonder if you had any advice or any particular text that maybe helped you imagine more.
I actually think Audre Lorde, like anything by her, like is always the starting point for anything. Like when I feel a bit lost, I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to read some Audre Lorde again, because that will just get me back on my thinking. And then there's so much within that as well, because then you can access her, but then you can access all these other writers that have followed, I guess, in her like footsteps and who've taken inspiration from her. And but also Octavia Butler. She was really important, like at the start of me thinking about Afrofuturism and speculative fictions for Black people and people of color. And reading creative books by non-white people, like that are imaginative and fictional, and I think that they speak to this world but also to other ones as well in a really amazing way.
I would 100% agree with Natasha. I tend to read a lot of Black feminists, and Audre Lorde just speaks to me like so much. Like, and also Tina Camp. I really enjoy reading her books. And I was thinking, when you repeat the question, can humans breathe underwater? And it feels like a similar thought I had to when I was reading Tina Camp's Listening to Images, because that's, in a sense, it's not possible in this, if without radical imagination, like without, moving away from, like, thinking about Afrofuturism, like, in a way, like making possibilities where right now there aren't. I don't know. Yeah, anything that's not like a white Western man writing something interesting. And like,
Totally.
Yeah, definitely.
I think sorry, were you going to say something, Natasha?
No, I just agree.
I think if you guys are both happy, I'd really love to, if you guys could share some more resources with us and maybe collate a little reading list for all of us. I think that'd be really helpful, because there is so much to unpick within your work, and so much research. You shared your Umbilic page, and there's so much. I've really enjoyed myself personally looking through everything and learning lots of things. So thank you guys very much. I am conscious of time. We have a few questions and comments from our lovely viewers. So I'll have a little look just now and see. So Jenny T, big up Jenny T. She says, hi, Natasha and Khadea. Thank you so much for sharing your work. Natasha, I wonder when you realised that writing was part of your practice. Has it always been there? And also, do you see a broad audience context to the work? I'd love to think of this being shown in schools. Thank you.
No, I didn't. And I would never say, like, maybe the last week I've been like, oh, maybe I do write. But it's like this weird thing that I have like a complicated relationship with, because writing feels like a really formal practice to have, and like to be a writer
Absolutely.
seems really like different from an artist, or like different. So I still never really say that, but then it definitely does, and then it lends itself, I think, to the images as well, and like how they work together as well. Maybe it's I guess more like, yeah, like moving image text, or like, I guess, yeah, there's different kind of ways.
I would say like a video essay. It feels
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something, yeah, I don't know.
It all really comes together, your words and the image and the way it's edited and stuff. Do you enjoy the editing process?
I do actually. It's probably my favorite part.
Yeah.
Like I really enjoy doing that, and I could do it forever if I'm like not stopped. So, I really, really enjoy it, and that makes it, I guess, yeah, like just the process of putting it all together and like changing the order of it and kind of that control. But I really just, yeah, enjoy clicking buttons.
Yeah.
And then I guess the second part, yeah, like it definitely, like it's really interesting to think about this film as it not existing in a space, and it kind of exists like, I guess, on a couple of like laptops, and that's like it in the idea of like physicality. And I'd love to show it in other spaces and like particular schools, definitely. And yeah,
I
like
wonder
really,
if it could exist underwater somehow. That'd be cool.
that'd be so nice. Yeah,
That'd be nice.
because you can get like so my initial plan was to kind of like make more like mics that you could use underwater and try and like get a camera on things, but I think, yeah, like those kind of like possibilities and stuff are really like endless, like with like water as a medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to go to another question. We've got a question from Babs. Was wondering about the cowrie shells. Are they commonly found around the world, or do they originate from somewhere in particular?
Oh, do you know what? I'm not too sure. I actually don't know. I don't know if any of you guys know about cowrie shells like too much, but no, I'm not sure about the origins. I just know like the different uses and things like money and decoration and for good luck. But and that's mainly in kind of like the global south, I guess. But yeah, I'm not too sure. Like that's what interested me the most when I went to Dunbar and found them all, because I was like, how, I don't imagine they originated from there or in Scotland. I imagine they come from somewhere warmer. So like to think about like how they got to the beaches there, and then for there to be so many and like really difficult to find as well, like they're tiny. Yeah, that was just really
Very
interesting
interesting.
journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Something to look more into. I'd like to know.
Yeah.
We have a question here. Having carried out so much research, do you have plans to develop other outcomes?
Yeah, I think like this research, because I was in two kind of like things that got published last year that used the same research as this project. So those were kind of like strands that came first, and I kind of see that continuing hopefully with, yeah, there's just so much that there's the stuff I want to build on, but there's stuff I want to go back to as well. And thinking about like those writing pieces as well and what they could be expanded into, or how they were done like a few months ago. So how do they fit in now with this work or speak to this work? But also, yeah, thinking about just like the ideas like citations as well, and like references, and how you can make like a library with those that can be visual or moving image. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if we've got any more audience questions.
Wait, I feel like your arena. I don't actually know how to say the platforms.
Neither do I.
It's kind of like a library. It's a library.
Yeah.
Internet things.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like it's really, really cool. I love that like platform to like display something in such an easy and like crisp way. I think it makes it seem less daunting as well, like accessing someone's channel and then like looking at their research. But I definitely am interested in like the ways of making that move, and like how things can be like clicked on and then expanded on, and maybe there's like a spoken part, or maybe there's an image, and how like, yeah, maybe like a website or something that contains everything and then has other things as well. But yeah, I think as well, like doing like programming and stuff like that is fitting a lot as well. Like my Black Spatial Imaginaries program for a short film festival in Glasgow, that was kind of more like artistic research in the beginning, because that started when the first, well, I guess the overall like Black Geographies project started. So there's been like different strands of like, yeah, like public events, but also like writing and I guess like workshops that I did last year that touched on like dreaming and Afrofuturism. So I think it kind of falls into, or like, yeah, it goes into every single part of like what I'm doing, at least a little bit. Yeah, whether programming, researching, like curating, or doing like more like visual stuff.
Thank you, guys. I don't think we've got any more questions, so I wonder if there's anything else you guys would like to say just now?
I just wanted to say thanks, Brooke. Thank you so much for hosting, and thank you for being great along with the HUBCAP team. You guys have been good. You're very patient with me, as I'm just like
thank you, and you as.
So it's
been really brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really great. I want to say thank you to both of you. Hopefully we can see each other in the flesh soon. I would love that.
I know we've not met, like, properly.
I know. I think I've seen the back of your head once. But, yeah, and it's HUBCAP's hope that we'll be able to present your work physically in the near future. So hopefully post-lockdown we'll be able to have a little soiree
I hope so.
and present some of your work and talk a bit more about some of the stuff, the research. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to our audience for your questions as well. I'd urge you...
thank you, Brooke, and thank you, HUBCAP, for just giving the space for this work to develop. We had the space tonight to just talk through some of them.
Our pleasure.
And great hosting. Like, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Getting there. So I urge everybody to keep an eye out on Natasha and Khadea's practice and work going forward, and keep an eye out on our social media platforms and theirs to see all the exciting stuff that's going to be happening soon. I'm sure post-lockdown it'll be a little mini boom of art and events, so I can't wait for that. Thank you guys a lot, and I'll see you soon. Hope you have a lovely evening and a good weekend, and thank you again. That was lovely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Speak soon.
Bye.